Something strange still happens on this hill. Lights turn on, doors move, and voices call out when no one is there. But what you're about to hear isn't a made-up ghost story. It's all real, based on true events that happened inside these walls. For years, thousands of people came to Waverly Hills Sanatorium for help. They were sick, they were scared, and they were promised hope. But hope didn't last long. This hospital became a place of secrets, where screams were normal and silence meant something worse. Even today, visitors say they feel watched. Some hear coughing in the halls, others see shadows by the windows, but no one can explain why it all began. What was this place really hiding, and why do so many say it never let go of the people who died inside? This is the true story of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, where healing turned to horror and the walls remember everything. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, like this video, comment your thoughts, and share it with friends, because what you are about to hear is true, and it will stay with you long after the video ends. The story of Waverly Hills begins long before the building we see today. In the early 1900s, Louisville was facing a deadly enemy. Tuberculosis, known as the White Plague, was sweeping through the city. Families lost loved ones at an alarming rate. Children, parents, and even grandparents fell victim. People lived in fear. There were no cures, and hospitals could not keep up with the sick. Every cough was a warning. Every fevered patient was a threat. Something had to be done, and fast. City officials searched for a solution. They wanted a place isolated from the crowded streets, where patients could breathe fresh air and recover, or at least be cared for with dignity. The hilltop just outside the city was chosen. It was far from the river, high above the lowlands where the disease spread fastest. The location promised clean air and open skies. It seemed almost magical, as if the very earth itself could heal. Families believed hope could live here. But what they didn't realize was that hope alone was not enough. In 1910, the first Waverly Hills Sanatorium opened. It was a small wooden structure, simple and functional. 2 pavilions with screened porches held just a few dozen patients. The idea was simple. Fresh air, sunlight, and rest could heal. Nurses and doctors worked tirelessly, tending to patients who were sick and weak. The halls were quiet, but for the coughing that never stopped. Every day, the staff faced the reality that some patients would not recover. The fear of death hovered in every corridor. As the years passed, the wooden building became overcrowded. More patients arrived than the facility could hold. Families traveled from miles away, desperate for care. The staff worked long hours, often sleeping little, but the disease was relentless. Doctors tried experimental treatments, some of them harsh, some of them painful, in hopes of saving lives. And yet, still, patients died. Beds emptied only to be refilled by new patients. The numbers grew too high to ignore. Something larger was needed, something that could hold the growing tide of suffering. In 1924, construction began on a new building. By 1926, a massive 5-story brick and concrete structure stood where the wooden sanatorium once was. It could house more than 400 patients. Every room opened onto a balcony. Hallways were long, lined with beds. Sunlight fell through tall windows. Fresh air was everywhere. Doctors believed in the healing power of the environment. They believed hope could survive here. And for a time, it did. Patients arrived, families felt relief. And the staff continued their fight against an invisible enemy. The staff became a community of care and endurance. Nurses walked the halls day and night. They helped patients breathe, cleaned the wards, and tried to bring comfort where they could. Doctors experimented with treatments of the time, some painful, some invasive. Fresh air therapy, strict rest, and even surgeries that removed ribs or collapsed lungs. Every window, every balcony, was built to give patients a chance at life. But sometimes, light could not save them. Death was a constant visitor, moving silently from room to room. Even with all the precautions, the sanatorium became a place where life and death walked together. Families visited, some hopeful, some afraid. Patients spent hours on porches, hoping the air would heal them. But inside, the hallways held a tension that never left. Whispers passed from patient to patient. Rumors spread about the tunnels beneath the hill where the dead were carried away in silence. Nurses and staff tried to keep the fear contained, but the knowledge of so much death lingered in every corner. Waverly Hills was meant to heal. Instead, it became a house of sorrow. And deep beneath its foundations, The first secrets were beginning to take shape. The hill was high, the air was clean, but the story of suffering had only just begun. And what many do not realize is that even in these early years, the building seemed to have a presence of its own. Staff spoke quietly of hearing faint footsteps where no one walked. Some patients said they felt unseen eyes watching them in the night. Doors would creak, even when the wind did not blow. The hill was high, the air was clean, but it was never truly silent. And those who stayed long enough began to wonder, was it just fear or something else entirely, waiting patiently in the shadows? Life inside Waverly Hills was far from easy. Every morning, the staff woke to a building filled with coughing and whispered fears. Patients spent hours on the open-air porches, even in freezing winters, hoping the crisp air would help them breathe. Some were children, some were elderly, most were in the prime of life. The sound of sickness was constant, a rhythm that never paused. Nurses walked the halls, offering comfort where they could, holding hands, applying warm compresses, trying to soothe pain that would not relent. Every day carried the same tension. Every night held the same fear. Doctors tried every treatment known at the time. Fresh air therapy was the foundation, but they also used collapse therapy, a brutal procedure that intentionally deflated a lung to give it a chance to rest. Some patients had ribs removed to relieve pressure on the lungs. These procedures were painful, frightening, and often unsuccessful. Yet every day, doctors worked tirelessly, moving from room to room, knowing that not everyone would survive. The air smelled faintly of medicine, disinfectant, and fear. Every cough seemed louder in the long hallways, every sigh heavier than the last. The psychological toll was immense. Patients watched their neighbors deteriorate, some coughing until they could no longer speak. Some died in their beds quietly, while others screamed in pain. Families could only watch from the porches, powerless to intervene. Nurses often carried the weight of grief on their own shoulders, trying to console those who would never leave. The staff became both caretakers and witnesses to tragedy, walking a fine line between compassion and despair. They saw hope vanish from eyes that once sparkled. They held hands that would never move again. They listened to voices that would never speak. Beneath the hospital, a secret tunnel ran down the hill. Staff called it the Body Chute. Its purpose was to discreetly carry out the dead, away from the eyes of those still fighting for life. A trolley would transport the bodies down to the road, hidden from view. Patients never saw it, but they could sense it. Footsteps echoed faintly along the hallways, doors would creak, and sometimes a soft thump could be heard from below. It was never spoken of openly, yet everyone knew the tunnel existed, and its presence added to the unshakable weight that hung in the air. Whispers of it passed from patient to patient, a chilling rumor that became part of the hospital's invisible architecture. The halls themselves seemed to carry memory. Patients claimed to hear voices whispering softly in empty corridors or faint footsteps in rooms where no one stood. Some spoke of a sudden coldness, as if the building itself exhaled a long-forgotten sorrow. Nurses and doctors, too, admitted that the hospital felt alive in ways that could not be measured. Every corner, every darkened stairwell, seemed to hold a story, a life, or a death waiting to be acknowledged. Even in the light of day, shadows seemed to linger in corners where sunlight could not reach. Every day was a delicate balance between hope and despair. Music was sometimes played to lift spirits, and small gestures of kindness gave fleeting relief. Children who could still play did so under watchful eyes. Simple games, a song, or a kind word could provide a momentary distraction from the omnipresent fear. But no comfort could erase the suffering that surrounded them. Families would leave, hoping the patient would survive, only to return to a bed empty or filled with a new patient. Even when a life was saved, it often came with scars, physical, emotional, and the lingering knowledge of how many others had not survived. The sanatorium became more than a hospital. It became a place where life and death coexisted, where hope and fear walked side by side. The Body Chute, the whispers, the footsteps, all these elements gave the building a presence that could not be ignored. Even the walls seemed to remember every cough, every scream, every final breath. Nurses whispered that some patients could sense those who had already died, that shadows of the lost seemed to linger just out of sight. Waverly Hills was meant to heal, but in doing so, it became a witness to tragedy. And while the disease eventually waned, The memories and echoes of what occurred inside its halls would never fade. Some visitors today report a chill in certain rooms or a strange heaviness in the air that cannot be explained. Others hear coughing that fades when they approach, or soft whispers that vanish as quickly as they came. These stories are not myths. They are echoes of the lives that filled the hallways, the work of staff who tried, and the fear and hope of patients who could not leave. Every floor, every corridor, every window and balcony holds the weight of hundreds of souls. The building itself has seen more than any human could bear, and it has not forgotten. The story of Waverly Hills does not end with disease and death. It continues in the silence, in the walls, in the hallways where the light barely reaches. It is a place of memories, of sorrow, and of courage. And as we leave this chapter, we move toward a new era, the closing of one tragedy, the beginning of another. The sanatorium would shut its doors, only to reopen in a different form, revealing that the hill would not release its hold on the lives within. The next chapter will explore the end of the tuberculosis era, the reopening as Woodhaven, and the slow decay that followed, leaving the building to witness yet another story of pain, neglect, and the lasting echoes of the past. By the 1940s, a new hope arrived in the form of medicine. Streptomycin, an antibiotic, began to turn the tide against tuberculosis. Patients started to recover, slowly at first, then more steadily. Waverly Hills, which had once been filled with the sick and dying, began to empty. The long hallways grew quieter. The coughing that had once echoed constantly began to fade. But even as hope returned, the building retained its weight. The walls still held the memory of those who had not survived, the echoes of so many lost lives. In June 1961, Waverly Hills officially closed as a tuberculosis sanatorium. The doctors, nurses, and staff who had dedicated their lives to the fight against the disease left behind more than just an empty building. They left a legacy of suffering, care, and countless untold stories. For decades, the hill had been a place of life, death, and everything in between. And though the disease had waned, the building itself was far from empty. Memory lingered like a shadow, impossible to remove. Just a year later, in 1962, the building reopened under a new name, Woodhaven Geriatric Center. The patients were older now, fragile and forgotten by society. What had been a hospital for young, desperate patients became a nursing home for the elderly. The halls that had once echoed with coughing now carried complaints of neglect and fear. Understaffing, poor conditions, and lack of funding became the new reality. The building's bricks, once gleaming in sunlight, began to show cracks. The windows darkened, the porches fell into disrepair, and the shadows in the hallways seemed to deepen. By 1982, Woodhaven closed for good. The building was abandoned, left to the wind and the elements. Windows shattered, letting in rain and cold. Vines crept along the walls, climbing toward the higher floors. The once hopeful balconies now hung empty, and the hospital's porches were silent. The hill that had heard coughing and cries for help now heard only the wind. Yet, even in abandonment, the building seemed alive. Those who approached claimed the air itself felt heavy, as if the hill was holding its breath. During these years, stories began to surface. Locals whispered of shadows moving through broken windows. Some spoke of sounds, footsteps, laughter, coughing, that seemed to come from nowhere. Room 502 became infamous for strange occurrences. Children who had lived at Woodhaven or visited for tours later told of hearing soft voices calling their names. Some visitors swore they saw a small ball rolling across a hallway by itself, only to vanish when approached. And still, the Body Chute beneath the hill remained a silent reminder of the hundreds of people carried away in secret. The building became a magnet for curiosity. Paranormal investigators arrived, setting up cameras, recorders, and sensors. Some captured unexplained noises, while others felt sudden chills. Evidence remained inconclusive, but the emotional impact was undeniable. Visitors often left with a sense of unease, as if the building itself were watching, waiting, remembering. The story of Waverly Hills had grown beyond disease and death. It had become a story of memory, of energy trapped in walls and corridors, of the traces left by thousands of lives lived and lost. Even in decay, Waverly Hills held power. Its emptiness amplified its history. The walls that had once seen so much suffering now seemed to breathe with the weight of their memories. The hill remained high, the air still crisp, but the building had become a vessel for all that had occurred inside. Its silence spoke louder than any noise, its shadows heavier than any sunlight. And though time passed, the echoes of life and death would not leave. They were embedded in every hallway, every cracked window, and every broken floorboard, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to walk its corridors. After decades of abandonment, Waverly Hills began to attract attention once again. Paranormal enthusiasts, historians, and curious visitors were drawn to the hill, each eager to experience the building for themselves. The stories were already widespread. Room 502, where a patient named Timmy was said to have died, became famous. Visitors reported hearing a small ball rolling across the floor, only to stop when approached. Footsteps echoed in empty corridors. Doors creaked in rooms that no one entered. The whispers of the past seemed alive, but they were not ghosts in the traditional sense. They were memories held tightly by the building itself. Investigators arrived, some with cameras, others with audio recorders. Some captured unexplained noises. Others reported sudden chills or strange shadows in photographs. Evidence was inconsistent, often leaving more questions than answers. Still, the emotional impact of being inside Waverly Hills was undeniable. Visitors described feelings of dread and sadness, as if the walls themselves were speaking. The building remembered every cough, every scream, every final breath. It was not a place haunted by monsters, but by history itself, a living archive of life, death, and despair. In 2001, the building's story took a new turn. New owners began restoration, careful to preserve the history while making the site safe for visitors. Public tours opened, offering people a chance to see the hallways, balconies, and the infamous Body Chute. Waverly Hills was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Even as it became a place of learning and exploration, the building retained its haunting presence. Visitors could sense the weight of what had happened there. They could feel the lives that had passed through, the hope, the pain, the fear, and the courage. The legends of Waverly Hills grew, but they were grounded in reality. It was not just a place of paranormal speculation. It was a place where thousands had lived and died, where doctors and nurses had fought tirelessly against a deadly disease. The building had witnessed immense suffering and small victories, heartbreak and perseverance. Its presence was a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength of human determination. The true haunting was not in what people might see, but in what the building remembered. People continued to be drawn to the hill. Some sought thrills, others sought understanding. They walked the long hallways, looked out from the sunlit balconies, and felt the chill that seemed to linger in certain rooms. The Body Chute, the whispers, and the shadows all reminded them of the real cost of hope. Visitors left with stories of what they had felt, carrying the weight of the building's history with them. Waverly Hills had become a mirror, reflecting the fears and hopes of those who entered. The restoration allowed the history to be preserved, yet the building never lost its haunting character. It stood as a monument to the lives it had housed, to the medical battles fought within its walls, and to the countless souls who had never left. Tour guides spoke of the facts, the treatments, and the lives of the patients, but the feeling of the building could not be explained with words alone. The presence was palpable. Every step on the floorboards, every echo in the hall, was a reminder that history was still alive here. The true haunting of Waverly Hills is not what people see. It is what the building remembers. Every hallway, every room, every broken window holds a story. The spirits of the past are embedded in the walls, not as specters, but as memories. And those who visit are witnesses, temporarily part of its history. The hill still stands above the city, watching, remembering, and quietly insisting that the stories of the lives lived and lost within its walls are never forgotten. The sun begins to set over the hill, casting long shadows across Waverly Hills. The building stands silent, yet it is far from empty. Its walls hold memories that cannot be erased. Every corridor, every balcony, every room whispers of the lives that passed through, of the struggles, the hope, and the heartbreak. The hill that once echoed with coughing and despair now listens, quietly holding the stories of those who lived and died within its walls. Visitors move through the halls in hushed tones, some curious, some apprehensive. They feel a chill in the air, a weight in the silence, as if the building itself is aware of their presence. Some report seeing shadows where none should be, or hearing faint footsteps in empty rooms. Others hear whispers, soft and fleeting, as if the memories of the past are trying to speak. The legends of Waverly Hills have grown, yet the truth remains. The most haunting presence is not supernatural, but the lives and histories embedded within its walls. The building still stands, watching over the city below. It has witnessed fear, pain, and hope. It has seen doctors fight tirelessly, nurses hold dying hands, and families hope against all odds. The real spirits of Waverly Hills are not monsters or ghosts, but the people who once filled its halls, their stories echoing long after their lives ended. Every creak, every shadow, every whisper is a testament to them, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of memory. Some say ghosts walk these halls. Others say it is only memory. Perhaps memory is the most powerful haunting of all. The building does not forget. The hill does not forgive. And those who enter become part of the story, witnesses to a history that cannot be erased. A history that waits quietly in every corner, every room, and every shadow. As night falls, Waverly Hills remains. The windows stare out like eyes, the hallways are dark and still, and the hill keeps its silent watch. It remembers every cough, every final breath, every moment of hope and despair. It is a place where history, tragedy, and perseverance coexist, and it continues to tell its story to those who dare to listen. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the cost of hope, the weight of memory, and the echo of lives that refuse to be forgotten. If this story captivated you, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, like if you were moved by the story, and share it with friends who love real-life mysteries. Comment below what part of Waverly Hills haunted you the most, because the echoes of this place are not easily forgotten.